Welcome to this week's edition of Copper and Ink. Our mission this week is to put Leuchtturm1917 through the wringer we call the Litmus Test. Here's our lineup of pens and inks. For this edition of the Litmus Test, we will be exploring inks on the Leuchtturm1917. So let's get into the Litmus Test. We will use our Fuyugaki ink by Pilot, and that will be loaded in a Lamy Safari with an extra fine tip. We will use Noodler's Brevity Blue, loaded into a Platinum Preppy, and this is the extra fine version of that, and this has been converted to an Eyedropper pen. If you want to see more information on how to do that, be sure to check out the linked shorts where we record those conversions. It's pretty simple to do, and if you do a lot of writing, it will be worth your time. Next up will be the Diamine Aurora Borealis, loaded in our everyday carry pen, the TWSBI Diamond 580 ALR. Next up is the Pelikan 401. Next up is the Pelikan 4001 in the violet color, also loaded into a converted Platinum Preppy. And it appears I misspoke. This is the extra fine version. This is the standard fine version. Then we'll have the Diamine Sparkling Shadows, a ink with some glitter mixed into it, and that is loaded into another Lamy Safari, this one in the fine size. And the final entry for this week will be the Bon Me glittering ink in the Saturn color. Again, high glitter in this one, and it is loaded into a Platinum Curidas, and that has a fine nib on it. So that's the lineup. Here we are laying down the first of our inks in the Litmus Test. Got our X's down, time as I started. And 5 seconds in, we end up with a pretty large amount of smearing there, smudging. Start with a 10-second test. And we'll run a few of these at normal speed so you kind of see the process, and then after that we'll start speeding through these. There's 10 seconds, and again a pretty large amount of smearing. So we will go up to 15. We probably should have made some bigger jumps here to expedite this, but here is 15 seconds with the Fuyugaki on Leuchtturm1917. 15 seconds, still smearing pretty heavily. Throwing 20 seconds on the clock, and the results are in. Still smearing. We'll put our 30 seconds on the clock. Seconds going by very quickly here, and with a smear test, it's much improved, but there's still about the middle of the X's where the ink's a little heavier, still a fair amount of smearing. So we'll go to 40 and see what we get there. And 40 seconds results in no smearing. So our dry time on the Fuyugaki is 40 seconds. Nice close up showing smudging there nice and clean at 40 seconds. And we'll run our feathering test. Color in our circle here. Got a little bit outside the lines on my own there at the top. But after looking at it for a little while, there was no feathering outside the circle. It stayed in its lane pretty well. Do a writing test. This paper is a friendly paper for writing. It is good feedback. It is an enjoyable writing paper, even with the fine or ultra fine. Very minimal to no bleed through, minor ghosting. And I failed to record the ink going down and the timer test on this, but it dried extremely well at 1 second on the Brevity Blue, so a very surprising result. So feathering on this one. This is a nice writing ink. I do think I would like it better in the extra fine versus the fine. It does put down a rather thick line. And unfortunately, this Noodler's ink in the Brevity Blue did have some bleed through. Moving on to the TWSBI 580 with the Aurora Borealis. And this was our surprising outlier in the first test, taking 1.5 minutes to dry on the Tomoe River paper. Here we are with the 5-second test and smearing. We're going to jump to 15 seconds here. And time lapse, we still have smearing at 15 seconds. We'll do the 30 and the 45 seconds back to back here. Here goes 30 seconds. Rapidly done, and here we are with the results. Very minor smearing, but it is there, it is noticeable. And at 45 seconds, the ink is dry. A marked improvement over the Tomoe River with this ink. About half the time to dry. And no feathering, even with that ink staying wet for 45 seconds. We'll do a feathering test. Some high-speed coloring. And you can see the resistance to feathering, and even the circle there doesn't fill itself in. So it has some blank spots in there. So solid performance from the Leuchtturm paper on the resistance to feathering, keeping the ink contained to where you put it. We have a writing test here. Again, this is one of my preferred pens and paper combinations at this point in time, and it continues to maintain that favored location. We have a new addition to the lineup for the Litmus Test, this Jinhao X159 in the extra fine using the Diamine Oxblood. This is a new favorite pen, and I do like this ink in it. It is a nice writing ink, but the dry time could be a problem, so let's run it through our tests here. Here we are at 15 seconds, and our 30-second test, we'll combine those back to back. 15 seconds on the clock. Still wet. 30 seconds. Kind of like the Aurora Borealis, that 30-second test still had some smearing, much lighter. You have to definitely look at it. We jump to 45. 45 seconds there is no smearing, so our clock's in at 45-second dry time. Color in our 1 centimeter circle. Check for feathering and bleed through, and it's a good result on both. Minor ghosting still seen here. The Pelikan 4001 Violet up next. 5 seconds on the clock. Definite smearing. Let's go to 10. And then 10 seconds we test again, and still some minor smearing. We'll jump to our 15-second test and see how this ink dries with 15 seconds on the clock. And there we are, stopping the clock, and no smearing. We'll do a double wipe just to make sure. 15-second dry time for the Pelikan 4001 Violet. The ink definitely does go down wet.
Incoming message.
The ink definitely does go down wet. You can see it shimmering there, but it does dry well without the feathering concerns in any way. A writing test. I do really like the feel of this extra fine Platinum Preppy. Surprisingly nice writing. Kind of adjacent to this video, but the Platinum Preppies have been impressive. Picked up a couple more to test out some other inks in. We'll see if they show up in future videos or not. Here comes the Diamine Sparkling Shadows. Putting the X's down, running the time. Obviously some smearing there at that 5-second mark. We'll jump up to 15 seconds. And still some small smearing, but not much, so let's go to 20 instead of the planned 30. And at 20 seconds, high speed. 20 seconds, the ink holds fast. Color in our test swatch. Not quite as, doesn't go down quite as wet as the Pelikan, but it does have some wetness to it that you can see, but no feathering there. Do a high-speed writing test, and again, no negative comments in that regard. And also no bleed through. Some minor ghosting, and that's kind of the theme of the Leuchtturm paper thus far. Here's our Noodler's ink, Polar Green, a new edition. Running that in our Curidas. Coming in at 5 seconds, we'll give that a start. This ink is reported to be one of the faster drying inks, so we'll see how it does at 5. And it is holding fast at 5, so let's drop down to 3. See how it does at 3 seconds. At 3 seconds, there is some very minor smudging at the bottom of those X's. Maybe kind of hard for the camera to pick that up, but it is some very minor smudging. It is able to be seen at the close inspection. We do our feathering test and a writing test. This is what I would describe as a dry ink. I didn't really understand that until you kind of write with this, and it does feel dry. It doesn't have any kind of shimmer or sheen when you are putting it down, even when it's fresh on the paper. And we check for bleed through and ghosting, there is definitely some bleed through on this one. Maybe even a little bit more in general than the Brevity Blue. It's maybe a factor of that quicker drying formula, producing a little bit more bleed through. Here you are with the torture test, the Milwaukee Inkzall coming in. Definitely dry as fast as we went on it. Terrible ghosting. The Zento Blue 0.38. Surprisingly large amount of smudging with this one, all the way up to about 35 seconds before the bottom of those X's stopped smudging. No bleed through though, no ghosting. That's worse than any of the others. And the mechanical pencil, very good results there, holding fast. Well, that concludes the litmus test for our Leuchtturm1917 as we ran it through the gambit of our various inks and papers, or inks and pens. So the question is, how would you score Leuchtturm1917? Well, Tomoe River on the last volume of the litmus test was given a 4.5 out of 5 and a lefty grade of 4 out of 5. So let's talk about how Leuchtturm1917 fared, and then we'll assign some grades. The downsides for the paper, we do see a fair amount of bleed through compared to the Tomoe River, especially when we get over to like that Brevity Blue. It did especially on the color test. That's about the only place it really bled through on that one. The ghosting is definitely an issue, but it's not insurmountable, and it's when you're going back and forth, you might not want to see the ink of the back page through. So that is a bit of a concern on the paper front. In the area where we really saw the bleed through was with the Milwaukee Inkzall. You can almost read it completely from the back page, comes through, and it is dark enough that you can see it 2-3 pages in, still having ghosting coming through. But I don't know about you, I don't ever write with a Sharpie in my journal. This is more of just a torture test for the paper, so I'm not going to hold that against the Leuchtturm overly so, just a example of the concern. And then with the ballpoint and the mechanical pencil, even those are able to be seen through, so it's not a fountain pen only concern on the Leuchtturm paper. But even with these kind of concerns on the ghosting, I still love the Leuchtturm paper. It's still a nice paper to write on. It's still my go-to every day, both with the price point and with the performance. So on the bad, the good. So the bad, we have some ghosting, and we have bleed through. The dry time, if we compare the same inks between Tomoe River and Leuchtturm, the Tomoe River on most of them had higher dry times, and when you get into the Brevity Blue, that was very close. The Fuyugaki actually dried twice as fast on the Tomoe River as it did on the Leuchtturm paper. Same with the Diamine shadows, but on the opposite, it was half as long to dry on the Leuchtturm as Tomoe River. So some interesting results based on the various inks. The most significant improvement was the Aurora Borealis. Came in at half the dry time as on the Tomoe River. The biggest outlier would be the Noodler's Polar Green. That was an addition to this test. I heard of it being one of the fastest drying inks out there, so I wanted to give it a try. And surprisingly, it dries slower than the Brevity Blue. But when it was on the Tomoe River paper, and I'll have a video showing this later, instead of a 5-second dry time, it had a 150-second dry time. That's 2.5 minutes it took for that ink to dry before it would stop smearing, which is a surprising result for an ink that we expected a much faster dry time on that. So definitely the paper was the difference on that one, and that is a surprising result. None of the others had anywhere near that kind of dry time issue or change. And the other outlier being the Fuyugaki with the dry time of 40 seconds on Leuchtturm, but only 20 on Tomoe River. So it was the only one that dried slower, if my memory serves me right, with only a couple being about equal. So I'd give the dry time a thumbs up on the Leuchtturm1917. It was definitely better overall than the Tomoe River. But if you're wanting to get the sheen, the shimmer from your ink, maybe that longer dry time is what you're looking for. So depending on your use, it may or may not be a positive that would sway the results. As far as the left-handed friendly score on this, the faster dry time I think bumps that up a little bit, deserving of a higher score than the Tomoe River on the left-handed side, just because of that faster dry time. And we gave Tomoe River a 4, so let's go with the left-handed score. Let's go 4.5 out of 5. And the overall score, again, we gave Tomoe River a 4.5 out of 5. The feathering was minimal. The resistance to bleed through was better than Leuchtturm. The ghosting was better. So I think we would end up giving Leuchtturm1917 an overall score. I think it is going to be a little bit lower than the 4.5 that we gave Tomoe River. I think we go in with overall writing score. Let's give it a 4.25. We're splitting hairs here on the dry time, the performance, the feathering. We didn't talk about that, but if you went through and looked at all of our marks, whether it's on the ballpoint, I mean, even the Inksol didn't have a feathering issue. And none of these writing samples have any kind of feathering issues. Again, the primary concern was the dry time, and as long as you get the dry time down, then you're not going to have your ink running all through it. So solid paper, very respectable performance, deserving of at least 4.25 stars, if not 4.5. And I think what gives Tomoe River the heads up is that little more resistance to the ghosting and the bleed through. So there you have it, the Leuchtturm1917 with a slightly lower overall score, but with a very solid 4.5 out of 5 on the left-handed score, with the lack of feathering and the quicker dry time, making it more friendly for those of us that tend to write in a way that smudges our ink. There are still opportunities for other papers to come in and take the crown, but this puts Leuchtturm1917 in the lead on the left-handed score and leaves Tomoe River with the overall paper score lead at 4.5. So after we've concluded our Leuchtturm1917 litmus test, now it's time to determine the next candidate to run through the gambit. We still have our Apica contender, our Rhodia, the Mnemosyne, Clairefontaine, a new addition to the list, we have some Endless Regalia paper. This was one that was recommended in a comment. We have Moleskin, and we have Midori, and then the other new addition, we have Iconic added in here as well. Personally, I'm leaning toward either the Midori or the Moleskin. See how they compare. This one is a head-to-head contender on the Midori front with Tomoe River, and the Moleskin, the contender for Leuchtturm. So the two kind of head-to-head pairings there. So which one would you like to see next? If you'd like to make a comment below, we'll take that into consideration before we issue the next round of the litmus test. Thank you for watching Copper and Ink. Please like and subscribe to the video. Recommend it to your pen-loving friends. And don't forget to mention if you want to see Midori, Moleskin, or one of these other notebooks in the next edition of the litmus test. Thank you for watching and have a great day.